Welcome to episode 2. This week we're getting stuck into one of the most biggest and controversial topics in boxing. Do you have to look boxed to have an opinion on boxing? It's something that I've been arguing about on Twitter for years. Debates, conversations, back and forward arguments, you name it, I've done it. We're going to look at why this debate never dies and how I think boxing's media has ended up with many unqualified voices, which is misleading the fans in my opinion. Then as always, we'll finish with a couple of tweets and then a quick preview of Parker versus Wardley. So the question is, do you have to look boxed to be able to speak on boxing? And it's a question that ruffles feathers a lot every time that it comes up on social media. Whenever this topic comes up, whenever I speak to people and they're giving you stick, giving you abuse, giving someone else abuse, giving someone else stick, or they're talking about like fights or what they would have done or this, that, I do ask a lot, well, have you fought? Because it counts and it matters a lot if you're discussing the technical elements or if you're trying to put yourself in their shoes on how they would feel and what you would do in a situation. If you've actually never done it, then you don't know. But it's a massive question, and it's one that always sort of, as I said, ruffles feathers, and it always creates a bit of a debate. And the loudest ones on this topic are usually the ones the cap fits, who haven't boxed. And before you know it, you're in an argument, and Twitter or X, whatever it's called now, there isn't enough characters to sort of get your point across. 140 characters isn't enough, and I'm not paying for a blue tick, so we'd be there all day talking about it. But this is the right place to actually talk about it. This is the right place to make that point and to get those issues spoken about on the YouTube channel where people can see. Now, if you're going to tell me how to kick a ball, how to strike a ball properly, how to put a bit of spin on a ball or something in football, then you better have played football, and it will help you massively if you know how to do it, to be able to demonstrate that. My issue has always been that if you don't really know how to do something, then you can't call yourself an expert in it. And we have so many boxing experts out there, and there's boxing experts all over the place, labelled so by themselves sometimes, but more importantly labelled that way by TV producers. And it's a bit of a kick in the teeth when you're watching something and you're trying to be educated in that thing, and the person that's walking you through it haven't done it themselves. And I think the fans deserve better. I think the ex-athletes of that sport certainly deserve better, and I think the television stations and networks can do better. I don't think you need to employ someone who has learned about that sport through a book or through TV or through watching it over someone who's actually done that, who can give you an insight of exactly what's going on, exactly what that person or that team or that player or that athlete is going through at that exact time. Now, for me, when I watch football, I want to be guided through it because I love it, I'm a fan, but I'm not clued up on it, and tactically I'm very, left behind, so to speak. So I want to be brought in at the right speed and the right pace for that. But it just doesn't work out that way, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. I'm going to get into the way the television networks sort of seem to work, and I'm going to get into the US formula of pundits being on multi-sports, which is something that I strongly disagree with. So online is sometimes one of the worst places you can be as an athlete or a fighter or a footballer or whatever. I imagine will all be the same in different sports. It's a place where people can voice their opinions, obviously, just like this is YouTube channel. That's what it's for, to voice the opinion, and I am going to voice mine in a way that I can't on social media, where you're restricted by characters, where you can't really express your feelings enough, and you've got to try and write them in a way, and things often get mistranslated on there. So I'm going to try and do that on here, and the arguments that I've had in the past have just been ridiculous, with people where they think they know what they're talking about. I've been arguing over the contract when I've got the contract in front of me. I've been arguing over rules and regulations when I know the rules and regulations off by heart, and they're saying they're sitting looking at the rule book and the amount of things, clauses in contracts, things arguing over gloves and fighting over, whether one fighter has a realization clause and things like that. It's ridiculous, and it genuinely frustrates me and winds me up. But it's a double-edged sword, and I know without social media, a lot of fighters would fall behind, and they wouldn't have the following that they have, and the admiration that they get, and everything else, and ticket sales, and so I do get it. It's a double-edged sword, but I think it has to stay respectful. I think it always has to it has to be a place where you can give your opinion and be appreciated for that opinion. You don't have to the box to have your opinion taken seriously. I do say that, I do admit that, I do know that. It's always the tone for me, and the tone is very important, and we'll discuss a bit more about that tone in a minute. So what is the line between being a fan and being an expert or a pundit, let's say? We see them on television, working, radio, whatever it is you want to say. We see them on the watch-alongs now. That's the new thing, watch-alongs. And it's something that does interest me because I'm baffled as why people would watch someone watching something else. And you can watch the thing yourself. But that's how the modern day social media and internet thing is. So it is what it is. But when we speak about television, when we speak about these networks or when fights are being shown and we see these pundits on and they're talking and giving their opinion, and because they're in a position of power on the television, or they're in a position of authority, let's say, we listen and we believe that what they're saying must be true. And too often it's not true, and too often it's very misleading, and too often it's not from a place of experience. They're not telling you, like, in my opinion, this is why this is happening because they've done it. They're telling you, in their opinion, this might be happening or should be happening because of what they think might be happening, and it's a bit backwards for me. I just don't get it. I've never really understood it. I don't know why people accept it, but there's a difference between being a fan and being an analyst. Now, if you're on there as a fan and you're explaining that you are a fan and you're giving your opinion as a fan on what you see and what you like, which I have done on football, by the way. There's a show on TalkSport called Inside Football about Liverpool, and I'm on there as a fan guest, and I swore before I went like that I wouldn't go on it if it meant that I was giving my opinion as a footballer or as anything to do with football in the industry, because I'm not in the industry. But I will go on as a fan, and I will have a discussion with other fans that are on there. And we have an ex-player on in Jermaine Pennant, and he gives his opinion. And he's played at the top level. He's played for my club. So I listen to him and I listen to what he's got to say, and I value what he's got to say because he's the pro and he's been there and done it. But if they ask me anything serious about what I would do in a situation, they're not getting an answer from me. I've said straight, I'm a fan, and I need to keep it that way because I'd feel a bit embarrassed if I had to give my opinion on football in any other capacity other than being a fan, because that's all I am. So it's not just boxing where this happens, it's obviously football. And being from the UK, being from Liverpool, we're big on football. I support Liverpool, I go to match home all the time on my season ticket, and I go away ones when I can. And I love the football. I'm not necessarily a massive football fan, but I am a massive Liverpool fan. So I'll only really watch Liverpool in the football. I'll watch Match of the Day. If I'm bored, I'll leave it on and I'll watch the rest of the teams after I've watched those. But to be honest with you, I'm a Liverpool fan. So when I watch the match, especially Monday Night Football, which is a great show, by the way, I'm educated on football there and then by Jamie Carragher. Sometimes Gary Neville when he's speaking, but Jamie Carragher will break a game down for me, for a fan like me, to be able to understand it more. And then when I'm watching, he'll have said things before the game to look out for, and I'll look out for them things and I'll see it happen in front of me. And it's things that I wouldn't have spotted probably if he hadn't pointed that out to me. Now, boxing's no different, and you need someone to guide you through if you're the average fan on the couch, and that's what most people are in boxing, the average fan on the couch, and that's great. There's no problem with that. I'm an average fan on the couch with football, and although I love it, and I love my team, and I follow them home and away, and I've seen us have some unbelievable nights, without being sort of guided through the game, I'm watching a different game than them pros are watching. They're watching the game, Carragher, all the other players out there, and they're 5 moves ahead of us, 6 moves ahead of us, and they're seeing things start and things unfold early on in the game that will come into play later on in the game. And it's the same with us watching a fight. And I think that's what a lot of people need to remember when we're seeing these pundits on television, or these experts, shall we say. And there's a couple of experts in boxing recently who've been on shows, who host shows. There's shows that are being hosted by people who've never actually boxed in their life. And it's an expert show with expert opinions, and neither of them have been in the ring. And it's frustrating for me as an ex-fighter watching it, because there's nothing that they can tell me on that show that's going to educate me one single bit, because I've been a pro. And the average fan on the street shouldn't accept it. And that's my point. Why should you accept mediocrity from someone who's never actually done this sport telling you about that sport, when, with all due respect, if you've been in the ring and sparred or boxed, you know more than them and you've got more experience than them? And I don't think you need to take it. I don't think fans deserve what they're getting fed at the moment, and what they're being fed is just an opinion based on what they might have read or watched from someone who just speaks well on television, or who just looks the part maybe, or maybe just does as he's told. And I don't know what it is in total, but the whole package, the whole setup of things, the way it is with boxing, listening to these so-called experts who've actually never fought, who've got no real experience apart from having a good memory and being good at memorising stats, let's say, I think the fans deserve better. And I know I certainly do, because I don't watch it with them anyway. I don't watch the shows, and when I'm watching television on fights, sometimes I mute it. And when you mute it, it's better, and you see the fight for what it is rather than being swayed by some either biased, terrible or incorrect commentary, which we see all too often in boxing at the moment. I think the fans deserve better, and I think they should get better, and I will explain more why in a minute. So what's the balance then? How do we do it without arguments? How do we do this without falling out, without slagging each other off, without there being a divide between boxers and non-boxers, or you have to have done it, you haven't have to have done it? Now, I know loads of people who in the industry whose opinion I respect massively, who haven't boxed, and they're out there. I can name them. You know, there's Adam Smith, there's other fellas out there who still love Ron Lewis, and he still love his opinion, really respect his opinion on boxing, and they've never boxed. I can hold a conversation with both of them on boxing because they've been very experienced and they've sat ringside watching some of the great fights over the years. And when it comes to scoring fights, I rate their opinions on the scoring. I rate the scoring as well, and I do think they get a lot right more than they do wrong. Ron used to always get the scoring spot on, and I used to look for his card first, to be honest with you. But there's also, for every Ron Lewis, there's the likes of Chris Mannix. For every Adam Smith, there's also the likes of Stephen A. Smith. And then people I will get into in the next segment, but it doesn't always mean that, you know, just because you haven't fought, you can have a great opinion on boxing, and it's okay. Like, there are some that shouldn't have an opinion on it, and we'll get to them in future, as I say. But for now, I think there's a happy medium that we can find somewhere, but as long as things stay respectful, we can all, you know, live in harmony and speak about boxing, about the sport that we all hopefully love. But there's just a lot of people out there who don't really love the boxing. The critics, they look for faults everywhere they go, and they're not watching something to enjoy it, they're watching it to find holes in it, to find problems in it. And the promoters are putting on great fights at the moment. We've probably never been so lucky in boxing at the moment, where these top fights happening, all the promoters are working together in harmony, everyone seems to be getting on, and I think social media needs to do that. Everyone needs to get on a little bit on there, but the promoters are getting on, as I say. The fights are happening, we're getting the best fights happening, we're having the best fight, the best, and I think we should all just enjoy it while it's lasting. Make the most of it while it's lasting, because it probably won't last forever. And the minute the Saudi influx maybe ends, I think we'll see less fights being made of the caliber that we're seeing at the moment. But this television and this new age, 2025, so to speak, this social media thing and this online content, what we see, which I'm obviously being a hypocrite providing to you now as well, I think it's breeding a whole new generation of sport experts. And unfortunately, a lot of them are experts who don't really know anything about the sport in general. So there's a bit of a familiar theme with the people that I'm going to be speaking about next. And the familiar theme is that 3 of them are American, and 2 of those Americans work on shows regularly together. And it's probably the American model and the American way of doing things, where they have a pundit or an analyst, or whatever you want to call them, an expert, and they're on. 1 minute they're on the football, American football, the next they're on the baseball, the next they're on the basketball, then they're on the ice hockey, and then they're on boxing. And it's like, how can you be an expert in so many things? And are you actually an expert in any one of them? Because from what I see, especially when it comes to boxing, the answer is absolutely not, no. Now, being an expert obviously means you know that industry inside out, but you must be able to do it as well. I don't think you can be an expert on driving if you can't drive. I don't think you could be an expert on any type of sport unless you can actually do that sport. That's just my opinion, but obviously these will disagree. But that US formula, I wonder, does that actually work? Would that work over here? Would we see someone of a pundit of, let's say, Gary Neville talking about football, and then going on to talk about boxing, and then going on to talk about horse racing, and then going on to talk about tennis? Like, I just don't think it would happen over here. But in the States, it happens a lot, and it happens where these are paid ridiculous money, which every credit to them if they can get it, to be an expert on all these different types of sports, when, in my opinion, I think they're actually an expert in none. But we're going to get into that now, and we'll start as we go along. So first on that list is Stephen A. Smith. Now, you can see what he looks like there, and I think we've all seen this boxing video of him, which I'm going to now show you. Now, Stephen is one of the most outspoken men in American sports. He has got a lot to say all the time, but particularly when it comes to boxing, he gets his 2 pence worth in all the time.
Yeah, make it more free. Yeah, push. Come on. Come on, it's your last round, so push.
I think when you box like this, it's probably best to keep a bit quiet about boxing, when actually this is your level of actually doing it. But this is a fella, obviously, who'll talk he'll speak about NFL, he'll speak about the NBA, and he'll give you his opinion as if it's fact. And my point to all of this has been it's the delivery, it's how it's delivered. And if you're delivering me a point on a sport as if you've done that sport, as if you're an expert in that sport, then you better back it up. But we know he's brash, we know he's, you know, fake it till you make it type of fella, and he's still absolutely amazing for himself in the States, by the way, to take nothing away from him for that. But I just think his knowledge on especially boxing is limited, and it would be on whatever notes he's got in front of him to read up on. I don't think he's probably, you know, with all due respect, we see them time and time again in boxing, people who without the stat pack and without the notes, they'd be absolutely, you know, lost. But he is definitely one that fits that bill. And I just think it's like so many of these people coming through are the same. So many of these people from the States are the same, but it's the fans that accept it, which is my problem. I don't know why fans accept this. Why would anyone who knows anything at all about boxing accept the opinion of Stephen A. Smith on boxing when you don't have to? You know what I mean? Change the channel, vote with your feet. There's so many talented fighters and ex-fighters from the United States of America. It's one of the best countries in the world that's ever produced champions, probably the best. They probably produced the most champions over the year per capita than any other city or any other country around the world, should I say. And I don't know why they accept mediocrity from people like Stephen A. Smith and the likes of the others that I'm going to mention. Now, next on this list is Chris Mannix. Chris works for DAZN. Chris has commentated on my brother's fights a couple of times, Liam and Callum, and I've met Chris a couple of times as well when I used to do little bits of work here and there for DAZN. And my argument and my gripe, whatever you want to call it, with Chris is we have fighters and ex-fighters like Carl Frampton, Tony Bellew, Darren Barker, Barry Jones, former world champions, know the stuff inside out. They know the game, they've fought, they've done it. Chris has never boxed. And at the end of every round, we go to Chris Mannix for the scorecard. And then 4 fellas are working on that card. And it baffles me. And I've just never understood why. I've made my feelings very, very open on social media. Like, why are we getting Chris Mannix's scorecard on a fight when, A, he can't score a fight anyway, he's terrible. He gets it wrong more than he gets it right. The scorecard for Callum against Joshua Buatsi, he had that fight to draw. It was ridiculous. That's one I can sort of remember that springs to mind. There's been many others, and there'll be many others, I'm sure, but it's the television networks that sort of create this dilemma, and it is a dilemma. And me watching that as a former fighter, I don't want to see Chris Mannix's scorecard. Why would I? I don't know how he scores a fight anyway, but he certainly can't do it better than Carl Frampton, Barry Jones, Tony Bellew or Dan Parker. And they're the 4 fighters that are working on the show when this happens. And I don't know how they must feel when they're standing there and they're being paid to give their expert opinion. And their opinion is expert, by the way. They know the stuff. They've all won world titles and they've all done it the hard way and they've all come through the very good boxers. And they're standing there scoring fights, and then on the break they go to Chris Mannix for the scorecard, and it's just something that's never sat right with me. It probably never will sit right with me. I'll probably let it get to me a little bit more than I should, but I think the whole system of television and the whole system of accepting mediocre opinions on a sport or a topic that they know nothing about really, apart from what they've learned in a book, when you have ex-fighters sitting there who know the stuff, who are very intelligent. Barry Jones, for me, is one of the best out there. Carl Frampton's absolutely brilliant as well. He's really coming on with his presenting skills and as well as his punditry skills, which we never in doubt. He's such a talented lad who speaks very well. He can score a fight really well as well, and a lot of the time I find myself siding with Carl. When I see Carl's scorecard, it's usually similar to mine. I think we probably see it in a similar way. But then you go to the break, and on the end of the round, let's go and get the expert card from Chris Mannix, and it's something that, as I say, will always piss me off a little bit, because I think we as fans, we as boxing people, we need to stop accepting this. Now we're going to come to Max Kellerman. Max has been known in boxing for many years now as the voice of HBO for After the Fights and the interviews and some of the documentaries and some of the previews that they've done in the past. The HBO were an unbelievable channel, unbelievable network for boxing. I loved the 24/7 feature which they did, which had Liv Schreiber, I think you pronounce it, as the main voice, and he's known as the HBO voice, but he's also Ray Donovan on television. And big boxing fan, and the show was great. The show was always a pleasure to watch. It was very well produced, and I love seeing things like that. And they've tried to do something similar recently on the Netflix show that we saw with Crawford and Canelo, which I thought was a great fight, a great event and a great spectacle. But with that great event and with that great spectacle, it brought back Max Kellerman, amongst a few others from boxing. And I'm not sure what to think of it, but what I've seen so far and what I'm still seeing now is not really good. And I think it's a bit of clickbait. I think things are being said just for the sake of saying it, and he's trying to be controversial, talking about greats, and he's mentioning greats of this era, generational greats of all time. It reminds me of the saying what he used right after the Crawford Canelo fight, the biggest stage of all. Netflix had 60 plus million viewers or whatever it was tuning in at that exact time, and I'm watching him trying to speak really slow with his hand shaking on the mic. And the saying is, or the saying was always, the GOAT is the greatest of all time. GOAT, that's what it means, capital G-O-A-T, greatest of all time. And he's shaking his hands and trying to get it across where he's making it all about him. Terence Crawford, you are the GOAT of this generation. So it's like the greatest of all time or the greatest of this generation, you know, like make your mind up. And it was a bad line to use, don't get me wrong, and listen, he can probably present things and speak a million times better than me. That's my whole point. I'm not criticising him as a person or completely, I just don't like what he does in boxing, how he speaks in boxing, and some of the stuff he says he needs calling up on, and it needs to be mentioned and it needs to be spoken about. In the fact that he mentioned Usyk this week, that Usyk, although he's a great, his resume at the top is pretty thin. Now, this is the same Alexander Usyk who stepped up from cruiserweight after dominating that division and winning every belt to step up to heavyweight to win every belt. And the top three fighters other than Usyk in the division are Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury and Daniel Dubois. Usyk has not only beat them once each, he's beat them twice each. And I don't know what more you want him to do, or what more Kellerman would want him to do to be recognised as the best in the division, a great, one of the all-time greats of heavyweight boxing, because whatever era you put Alexander Usyk in, I think he would have held his own. And the people mention all the older names of the past, and that's what I think Kellerman was just trying to do, just show a little bit of his boxing memory off, because you know the knowledge is from memory, and the knowledge is from memorising stats and memorising fighters and memorising events that happened. And that's where a lot of people mistake an expert who actually doesn't do the subject that they're claiming to be an expert in with a good memory. And a lot of people in boxing who call themselves experts have just got good memories and memorise the stats and memorise the results of fights. Now you can name all your Henry Coopers and everyone else who Ali fought. Ali was only a lighter weight compared to what the modern day heavyweights are. You've seen how Usyk's handled the likes of Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois and Tyson Fury, big, huge men who were much bigger than what your Ali's and your Tysons and everyone else were. And I feel Usyk in any era would have held his own. And that's not just me saying it to go against what Max Kellerman says. I don't need to compete with Max Kellerman when it comes to boxing and what an opinion of it is. I'm confident with my own opinion against anyone. But I feel anyone that rules Usyk out for what he's done as achievements in any era is a fool. And I think it's unfair on Usyk. I think what he's done and what he's achieved, how he's beat the fighters that he's beaten and what he's actually won in this game is and will be spoken about for a long time, and is legendary. And he is a great, no matter what era or what time or what generation you put him in. He'll hold his own and more. As a fighter, as a man, I think he's absolutely class, and he's got the backing of a whole nation behind him in the Ukraine, but he's also got backing of people like us in the UK and people in the States who love him and love what he stands for, what he is, how he fights, his attitude, his mentality. And the people in his team who talk to me about him, like Russ Amber, just say, like, you've never met anyone like this man. Now, I think for someone like Max Kellerman to discredit him and just the way it happened and the way he said it, to then obviously go on with the guest that he had on the show, was an NFL player, to then discredit Anthony Joshua and talk about whether he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame is, again, it's criminal. And what these fighters have done. Do I think Anthony Joshua's in the top 10 heavyweights of all time, or Usyk? Probably not myself. But to just dismiss him the way they do and the way they spoke about him is very unfair. And listen, that's an NFL player. There's one boxer on that panel. Mike Coppinger doesn't box and hasn't boxed. Mike's a reporter, and he's a nice fellow as well, by the way. I like him and I get on with him. But you can't sit there and call yourselves boxing experts when you don't box also, and you've never boxed. And Kellerman, Coppinger and Shade, or whoever it was that was on the show, they've never boxed. Chris Aliola has, and he has done. And he was speaking with a fair bit of respect. But I think the disrespect that's been put on people like Usyk and Anthony Joshua in conversations like that, on shows like that, is not fair and isn't right. And I think a lot more respect should be put on their name, so to speak, to use that saying. But listen, Max Kellerman is one of them people who will always have an opinion. It will always come across as a bit arrogant. And going back to the very start of the show, what I've said is in, like, do you have to the box to be able to have an opinion? The answer was then no, and it still is no. And I'll use Simon Jordan as a glaringly opposite end of that argument, in the fact that I do a show with him every week. And on that show every week, he will openly say to us, look, you're the expert, you're boxed. You know, you're the one who's actually been in there. What will happen there, or what will this be? But when you want to talk about business and business dealings in boxing, and whether the gate will sell, and whether the television deal and the networks will come together, or this or that, that's where people like Simon Jordan will excel. That's where they are the experts. That's where they know the business. And the rest of us are just sort of, you know, fight fans who have to sort of try and catch up, or fighters who have to catch up on the business side of the game. And the business side of the game is huge as well. But he will openly say, you the boxers, you should know. And people like that deserve their opinion. People like Max deserves his opinion. I just wish he delivered it a little bit better and a little bit more respectful. So this Saturday we see Joseph Parker fight against Fabio Wardley in the O2 Arena for Queensberry on DAZN Live, and it's a fight that I'm really looking forward to actually going now. I'm working it for TalkSport, I'm commentating for TalkSport, and I'm happy that I'm getting the chance to watch this up close, because it is a fight that has the makings of being a very good fight between two good, athletic, big punching heavyweights. Obviously Joseph Parker's been there and done already. He's won the world title. Fabio Wardley is desperate to win the world title, as every fighter should be, and it's a big potential banana skin fight for Joseph Parker, being mandatory challenger for Alexander Usyk and being the interim champion already. He has a lot to lose, and taking a fight like this is commendable. You have to take your hat off to Joseph Parker for doing so, but it's also very dangerous. And sometimes when you take fights like this, it goes against them, and it's a you know, what have you done moment, so to speak. Now, I can't see that happening on the weekend. I can see Parker winning well. I can see the facial damage of Wardley coming into play. He has a big cut on the bridge of his nose, and it's right where the bone meets the cartilage, and on them type of cuts, when we see them historically in boxing, they usually always open up. And I think it may struggle with the sharp straight shots of Parker, which he has, and Parker can punch a bit as well. He's very accurate. My prediction for the fight, I'm gonna predict the safe bet, in my opinion, a Parker stoppage between the rounds of 7 and 12, second half of the fight. I won't pick particular rounds. I just think he's got enough to get Fabio Wardley out there, who did struggle against Justice Honey all the way through the fight, until obviously he pulled that equaliser up to the back. And I'll use the word equaliser for him because he does carry that power. But I think Joseph Parker's a bit more switched on. We've seen him in a devastating performance against Matt McCauley last time, outstopping him in I think it was 3 rounds. And that was a surprise for me. I thought he was going to be for the tough night against McCauley, albeit didn't look that good. So yeah, I think the safe money for me will be on Parker to win by stoppage late.